Many thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. So it appears I owe many of you an explanation as to why you haven't seen me using my Fuji GFX recently in videos here on YouTube and Instagram. So over the past month, I've received many comments inquiring about this, of which I haven't really responded to any of them, and for that I apologize. But honestly, I really wasn't sure exactly what to say at the time. I do want to mention this first. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the Fuji GFX100s. It's still, to this day, one of the best cameras I've ever had the privilege of using. This was my main stills camera since the day it was released over 3 years ago, and I absolutely love it. But something happened during my Bali workshop last month that I want to address here that's had a really profound impact on the way I look at my photography. And I don't have a bunch of fancy B-roll to overlay in this video or technical measurements and pixel peeping I'm going to share. This is just going to be a real conversation about why I'm doing what I'm about to do. What happened on this trip? So I was doing my workshop in Bali a few weeks ago over in Indonesia, and I had a little bit of downtime, and I was actually going through my website. I was updating my workshop page. I was adding some new photos to my portfolio gallery inside my website. I started to just kind of surf around a little bit, which honestly I don't really do a whole lot of on my own website, but I was just starting to kind of peruse it a little bit, and I noticed that on my portfolio page there was very little longer focal length work recently. Everything that was on there that was in the kind of the telephoto or super telephoto range was literally from quite a few years ago. And I started to think about that. That kind of caught my attention, and I realized pretty quickly that there was very little long lens work with the GFX100s. And it's not because this camera isn't capable of it, it's because there really isn't a great long lens solution for it. I've mentioned this many times throughout videos over the years since I've been using this system. And this is really the long lens I've been using with the system, which is a 100 to 200 millimeter lens, which is the full frame equivalent of, it gives me like around 180 millimeters of reach, which honestly is not that long. I'm a huge fan of super telephoto focal lengths, and I started to think to myself for the very first time ever since I've been in photography, is my gear starting to limit my photography? Is my gear starting to limit my own creativity? Is my gear, in essence, kind of holding me back a little bit? And I started to think about that, and it really kind of stuck with me. That's why I kind of call it my profound impact, because it was that light bulb moment for the first time ever. I started to really think about that, and it was kind of a gut punch moment. Is my gear, my camera gear, dictating the type of photographs that I go after? And for me, that is something that I absolutely did not want. It's something that was a little bit of an eye-opening moment for me. So my reaction to that, after really thinking about it for the last few days of that tour, and I took the long journey back, and I kept kind of thinking about this, and I was like, you know what, should I start to explore a little bit? And, you know, I haven't used a full frame camera since before I switched over to the Fuji system. You know, I've been using the Fuji X-T3, the X-T4, the X-T5, and then the GFX100s. So I've been using the Fuji system for, maybe it's a little over 7 years now. And before that, I used the Nikon D3100 and the Nikon D750, which is 750 is a full frame camera. And that was really the last, I used a Sony a7R II for maybe a year in between there, but I haven't used a full frame camera in many, many years. It's either been crop sensor with the XT series or medium format with the GFX series. So I started to kind of think about that. Should I revisit full frame cameras again, And then, when you get things stuck in your mind a little bit, you kind of talk yourself into things. And I started to think, well, with a full frame camera, there is definitely more focal length options at your disposal. There's generally more lenses at your disposal, so that is a benefit. I've also mentioned on in videos over the past few years since I've been using this medium format system that whenever you use a medium format camera, the depth of field is much more shallow than a full frame camera, and which ultimately means that you might have to focus stack your photographs more often. And I'm not a big fan of having to focus stack a lot of things. So that was always something that was in the back of my mind that I didn't really enjoy doing. So I started to kind of like noodle on this idea of, maybe I should start to look out and just see what else is available. I haven't really looked at new camera systems in many, many years, and I figured now would be a good opportunity to do that. So I started to do research into Canon, into Sony, and into Nikon, and I was already familiar with the Nikon system. As I mentioned, the very first camera I really started to use for landscape photography was the D3100, and then I went to the D750, so I was a little bit familiar with the Nikon system. I always heard great things about the Nikon Z lenses for their mirrorless camera once they went mirrorless. And I've also heard amazing things about the Z7 II, the Z8, the Z9. So I started to kind of dig into those a little bit more because I was already familiar with that Nikon ecosystem. And I decided to test out the Nikon Z8, which is the camera that many of you saw in that on-location video from the Smokies a couple weeks ago. I put this in many Instagram reels. So I decided to kind of test this system out. And yeah, I've really, and I do want to mention this, Nikon never reached out to me. I didn't even reach out to Nikon. I actually reached out to my contacts over at B&H, and they sent me over a kit to test out on loan. But I started to kind of play around with it, and some of the things that I guess I really enjoyed about the Nikon system is one, and I know that the common question is, or the common thinking here is that the full frame camera is going to be substantially smaller. It's going to be lighter than the GFX100s. In all honesty, they're pretty much the exact same size. Actually, the Z8 is taller than the GFX100s. The 100S might be a little bit wider, but in essence, they're pretty much the same size. But the biggest difference here, I've got so much camera gear on this table right now. The biggest difference between the full frame system and the medium format system is really the size of the lenses. I tested out one of the very first lenses I tested out, I should say, and it was really the lens I think I only used in the Smokies for the most part in that video, was this 14-24 f2.8, which is an absolutely brilliant lens. And comparing it to the 20-35, which is like a 16-35 with the GFX system, this is where you're going to see a big difference. So the full frame lenses are substantially smaller than the medium format lenses. But I really, really like this lens right here. And what I really like about this, they also make a 14-30, I believe, but that's an f4, which is also an amazing lens. But if I went with the f4 lens, then I really wouldn't have a good option for shooting astro, which I don't really do a lot of astrophotography, but every few times a year, I do have an opportunity to do that. And if I have a 2.8 lens, I have the equipment in order to do that. So there's nothing there that can hold me back. Because remember, that was kind of the big issue that I was having, is I don't want to think that the camera gear I'm using is dictating the types of photographs I would go after. And when I reviewed my portfolio, I started to realize that that's exactly what was happening. And then I started to think about that, and I started to view the landscape in certain ways based off of the gear that I had. So when I was using the GFX system, I knew I had a good wide angle lens. I knew I had a good mid-range zoom lens, but I knew I did not have a good telephoto option. So I started to not even pay attention to that focal length at all. Everything I was thinking about was wide to mid. And that really impacted, I think, I hate to use the word, not my creativity, but just the way that I was looking at the landscape. And then it was something that, quite honestly, it kind of bugged me a little bit, because it just was something that didn't dawn on me before. And I kind of felt a little, I don't know, dumb, I guess, because I've been using the system for 3 years, and it never occurred to me that it could be changing the way that I look at my own photography. So, long story short, let me just move these out of the way right here so I have a little bit more room. I don't want to knock any of this on the ground, because that wouldn't be good. So as I mentioned, I started to use the Z8, and I really enjoyed it. I like a bigger camera. I'm not trying to get the smallest camera possible. I have larger hands. I like a big, deep grip. I like something that I can really feel in my hands, and I enjoy the way that this camera feels. I mentioned that I've been testing out the 14-24, which is absolutely brilliant. Some of my favorite images from the Smokies here was captured with this lens. It's absolutely beautiful. I also, they sent me over the 24-70 2.8. Once again, absolutely incredible lens, but I heard so many people talking about the 24-120, and that's an amazing focal range. And this is an f4, this is an f2.8. I don't really need the f2.8, because I have the f2.8 with the wide angle, which is what I would use for astro. So I don't really need a mid-range 2.8. And I really love this focal length, and so many people were saying that just how incredibly sharp this lens is. Typically when you get a focal range as great as a 24 to 120, the images aren't quite as sharp as, say, a 24 to 70 or a smaller focal range lens. But this is absolutely brilliant. I heard so many good things about it. This is pretty much the lens that lived on my camera on my trip to the Tetons that I just got back from. As you can see, I got back from the Out of Grand Teton event, which is absolutely incredible event. But this pretty much lived on my camera. Every one of these photographs I'll show here was captured with this lens, and this is brilliant right here. And it's much lighter, and the best part is this. This right here is like a $21 or $2,200 lens. It's kind of heavy, about the same size. This right here is a $1,000 lens, which is still a lot, but it's substantially cheaper, and it's a little bit lighter, and it's a little bit shorter. So I do think that I'm gonna go with this 24 to 120 right here because this is brilliant. All of these lenses are Nikon's S lenses. Is that what? Yeah, Nikon's S lens right here, which is the badge that Nikon puts on all their best lenses or their premier lenses. So this is absolutely beautiful. And then of course, I got this, the 100 to 400 millimeter lens, which is absolutely incredible. I very much missed this focal length. I used this on a few of the overlook photographs on my trip to the Smokies a couple weeks ago. It's just so nice to be able to have this. And for the first time in my photographic career, I have 14 millimeters all the way to 400 millimeters with absolutely no gap in between. I've never had that before. And frankly, it feels kind of good to have that. There's nothing holding me back whatsoever. And I've used this, I use this system. That's the only system I brought to the Smokies. This is the only system I brought to the Grand Tetons. I use it exclusively, and frankly, I really enjoyed it. I loved it. I'm starting to think that full frame sensors is kind of that sweet spot. You know, a medium format sensor, you're definitely collecting more information, more light. You're probably not gonna have to bracket photographs as much as you would with full frame or a crop sensor camera. And I have noticed that I bracket photographs a little bit more with this system, but the depth of field, in my opinion, is much more forgiving, a little bit more usable. It's not quite as shallow as medium format. I haven't focus stacked one photograph with this. All of these close-up images from the Smokies, especially this one right here, I mean, these areas in the scene are extremely close to my camera, but all of this was captured in one image, which was really, really wonderful because of that full frame sensor. I didn't have to focus stack things as much. So I think that full frame is kind of the sweet spot when it comes to sensor size. You're still gonna get plenty of light collection. You're still gonna get plenty of information that's able to gather because it's still a full frame sensor, but you're not gonna have that extremely shallow depth of field that a medium format sensor provides. So I really, really did enjoy that. So long story short, I hope this video is not going too long. I do want to show some of these photographs real quick right here that I just kind of glossed over this. This is an image from the Tetons. This was captured with the 24 to 120, which I absolutely love the way this image is coming out. Not completed yet, but I like the way that's turning out so far. This is one of the images from the Smokies right here. This is another one from the Tetons. Smokies again. This is with the 14 to 24. I believe this is at like 16 millimeters, so almost completely wide open, and I really, really enjoy that. And then another one from the Tetons right here, and then one more from the Smokies. But all of these photographs, all of the ones from the Tetons are with the 24 to 120. The ones from the Smokies are with the 14 to 24, 2.8. But I really like the lenses. I really like the camera. And I have not made the official decision. I guess the official decision is when I actually send money to B&H for all of this stuff. But I am pretty certain that I am going to move over to the Nikon Z8 and this 3 lens system here. Like I mentioned, it's very nice to have such coverage, 14 millimeters to 400 millimeters in such a small, fairly lightweight setup. I love the files. I love the way they edit. I love the highlights specifically. Let me just show you up here real quick. Let me go up here to the develop module. Let me drop down the basics section right here. Just the way that these highlights edit, you know, this is with no highlight recovery, with highlight recovery. There's just a huge difference here. And it's something that I didn't really see with the GFX system. I just kind of felt like, and it was just something that was always in the back of my mind a little bit. I was never a huge fan of, honestly, it might be my only kind of gripe a little bit with the GFX system, and maybe it was user error the way I was exposing my photographs, but I never got great control over the highlights and post-processing. But with the Nikon camera, or Nikon sensor, I just love how much you just get, how much latitude and control you have over the highlights, which is very, very nice, and is something that I kind of missed a little bit. So as of right now, I'm loving the way the files edit. I love using the Nikon camera, and as you can probably tell, I'm very excited with it. So I'm more than likely am gonna switch everything over here. I think I've got maybe another 3 weeks to kind of play around with this system before I either have to send it all back to B&H or just purchase it outright. But I wanted to make this video, I have no idea how long it's going, not too long, but just to kind of clear the air a little bit. I got a lot of questions. I wasn't trying to be kind of cryptic about any of it. I honestly just didn't even know what the answer was at the time. I didn't know if I was switching or not. I was just trying to test the waters out because it's been a long time since I've looked at any other camera system or really any other camera brand or anything. And I wanted to kind of just see what else is out there. So that is the short story. Before I do wrap things up here, I do just want to say a big thanks to the sponsor of this week's video, which is Squarespace, who I use for all of my website and e-commerce needs. Squarespace provides a robust and beautiful online platform to develop your website. You can showcase your photography using Squarespace's new blueprint design system to help guide you through the options to building your online presence from the ground up. You can even display your photography using Squarespace's flexible website design templates and customize the layout in order to make it your own. And with Squarespace's online store feature, you'll have access to all the tools you need to start selling your physical goods, digital content, or service products online with ease. So if you're looking to start a new website or possibly upgrade your current website, check out squarespace.com/Mark Denney for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. So I do hope you enjoyed this week's video. I hope maybe you found, I guess, my thought track of what I was thinking in regards to completely switching camera systems, which is not a decision that I take very lightly at all. This is a very expensive switch. Anytime you go from one brand to another brand, obviously you're getting a new camera body, you're getting all new camera lenses, batteries, L bracket. I mean, whatever it is, it's an expensive change, and it's definitely not something that I take lightly, and it's not something that I do very often either. I've only switched camera brands now. I guess started off with Nikon. I used Sony briefly, and then over to Fuji, and now back to Nikon. So I guess, what is that, 3 or 4 times over my entire photographic career. But most of those changes actually occurred in the first, I guess, 3 years, and really hasn't been anything in a long, long time. So if you do have any questions about the Fuji system or this new Nikon system or any of my thinking in regards to this, please leave those in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to get back in touch with you as soon as humanly possible. And if you did enjoy this week's video, if you could, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already, and as always, I really do appreciate you carving out a little bit of time to spend it with me here today, and I'll see you all next Wednesday. Bye.